Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another video on my channel Hairliciously. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe so that you guys are updated on hair loss and hair transplant topics, as well as updates on current hair loss treatments in the pipeline. If you guys are also losing hair, make sure to visit my website at hairliciously.com for hair loss treatment solutions backed by science. In today's video, I want to share with you a rather heartbreaking and eye-opening story that's been making headlines in regards to Turkish hair transplants. A 38-year-old British man named Martin Latchman recently died after traveling to Istanbul, Turkey for his second hair transplant at the popular Dr. Emrah Sinek's hair transplant clinic. And for those who are not aware, Dr. Sinek's clinic is probably one of the top 5 clinics that people go to in Turkey. They've done well over 50,000 hair transplants, and it's kind of like what people consider to be a hair mill, in the sense where you're going to have a lot of the technicians that perform the vast majority of the procedure. Most Turkish hair transplant clinics that operate in this manner are going to offer different bundle packages, starting with hotels, accommodations. They're going to take care of all the transportation for you, picking you up from the airport, dropping you back off. And the thing is that you can easily get 3,000 graft hair transplants for under $5,000 USD, which is a fraction of the cost you'd pay in the US. And this is one of the main reasons why people go to Turkey to get a hair transplant, due to its affordability. And on the website, they offer several different packages. And it looks like the most popular one is the Sapphire FUE hair transplant, all-inclusive package for under 3,000 euros, which is going to be under $3,500 USD. This price can go up depending on the number of grafts required, but it is pretty common to be able to get 3, 4, 5,000 grafts for well under $5,000 USD in most clinics in Turkey. The article stated that Martin had suddenly collapsed before the surgery even began, and he was rushed to the ICU, and then he tragically passed away the same day. You have to remember that this was actually his second hair transplant at the same clinic, so he obviously didn't have any issues the first time. He felt pretty happy with the first result. But what we can tell from this article is that something likely went wrong after he was administered medication or some type of anesthetic. There's a lot of variables that could have come into play. He could have suffered from anesthesia reactions, although this is probably unlikely given that his first time he didn't seem to have any issues. He could have had an undiagnosed medical condition like heart issues or something that was not disclosed or he didn't know about. Maybe a blood clot. There's probably going to be a million different possibilities on what could have gone wrong. And there obviously, could have also been medical negligence on the clinic's part. But the article did state that all necessary medical evaluations and tests, including blood work, chest x-rays, ECG, everything was carried out thoroughly. But I do find this part a little bit suspicious and strange because, as far as I know, clinics actually do blood work, but they usually don't do chest x-rays or ECGs, and I'm speaking from personal experience after going to one of Istanbul's popular hair transplant clinics. So I'm not sure if this is kind of like the like extra fluff to make it sound like the clinic presumably was thorough with their pre-medical checklist, but who really knows what could have happened, right? So this is still an ongoing investigation, and an autopsy is going to be performed, and it's going to reveal exactly what had transpired that led to the untimely death of Martin. So my thoughts on this, given that a lot of people go to Turkey for hair transplants, the vast majority of people getting hair transplants, whether you go to Turkey, South Korea, the US, wherever, they are not going to die for the most case. Hair transplants are performed under local anesthesia with light sedation, and generally speaking, it's going to be considered a very low-risk surgery. But with that said, a lot of people go to Turkey because it's cheap. I think the average Joe wanting to get a hair transplant doesn't really do research. It's more of just kind of like going to where the price is affordable. Advertising that he sees on social media with all those boxed-in hairlines. And, stuff like that can appeal to a lot of people to go to Turkey to get it done. Research is really key because, yes, people want to pay as little as possible for the best hair transplant, but typically the best hair transplant clinics are not going to operate as a hair mill. If money obviously wasn't a factor for everybody, I strongly doubt that you guys would even want to go to Turkey to get a hair transplant where it's operated like a hair mill with all the technicians doing the vast majority of the work. And the reason for this is because when you're dealing with a clinic that has multiple technicians operating on 20, 30, 40 patients a day, all with minimal interaction and supervision of the doctor, you're not likely to get a good hair transplant result. Yes, you might come across a skilled and experienced technician who's been working there for many years who actually knows what he or she is doing. But at the end of the day, it's a draw, and you ultimately want to, have the doctor to be involved as much as possible for all of the procedure. Now, many hair transplant clinics in Turkey will have the doctor. They're going to, just draw out the hairline, maybe extract a few grafts from the back of the donor area, maybe do some slits, and then leave it up to the technicians to do all of the work. Technically, you're really paying for the technicians and not the doctor to do the vast majority of the work. And this is exactly why prices in Turkey are going to be far more cheaper than going to a clinic that operates where a doctor just works on 1 or 2 patients a day and performs the vast majority of the surgery him or herself with just a few technicians to assist. Now, I'm not trying to badmouth all Turkish hair transplant clinics, because there are good ones out there. You just have to do your research and look. But I strongly feel that the bad ones outweigh the good ones. And like I mentioned, if money was not going to be a factor, I'm sure all of you guys would want to go to a clinic where an actual doctor is going to be far more involved in the procedure than a bunch of technicians doing most of the work. And when you're dealing with a hair mill, you sometimes can also feel like a number, right? You're kind of like at this assembly line where everything is done in mass quantity. And honestly, if I just really had to guess on what had happened to Martin, and remember, this is just going to be my own speculation and my own personal opinion. It's possible that he might have received an overdose of a local anesthetic or sedative that was administered by somebody lacking medical training outside of extracting and implanting grafts. I think sometimes when a doctor is not directly involved in administering medications or performing surgery, the risks of overdosing or incorrect dosing are going to be much higher. Obviously, I don't know exactly what had happened, but this is based on the fact that this happened before the actual hair transplant took place, meaning something likely relating to the medication or anesthetics played a big factor. And apparently, the police are also considering this case to be a reckless homicide. So we're going to have to see what happens once we get more updates. I think what makes it more tragic is that this wasn't his first time going to the same clinic. He actually has been there before for his first hair transplant, and simply thought that his second procedure was going to be just the same without running into any issues. And to be fair, this clinic could have done nothing wrong, right? They've done 50,000 hair transplants, and I believe this is like one of the few times where people actually died. They could have done everything by the book, all the proper medical procedures and medication dosages. And this case could have been one of those rare cases where people can sometimes, unfortunately, have complications during surgery. Although rare, we do hear about people having complications even in the US, places in Asia, Mexico. So this can just be something where this person was just unlucky and possibly tied to unrelated health issues. I think painting an entire country or every clinic as being dangerous based on a single incident is unfair, and ignore the thousands of successful complication-free surgeries that are done, daily worldwide. I think the more important factors we really need to factor and consider are the quality and ethics of the surgeon, proper medical oversight, and honest patient education about risks, regardless of which clinic you go to. Don't cut corners on research. Really look into the doctor and also the technicians who are involved in the procedure. Hair transplantation is also a highly skilled art where the doctors need to know how to create natural looking results with adequate density. They need to know how to place the correct angle placement with the proper graft size. And there's going to be a lot of things involved, and this is why researching and educating yourself thoroughly before just jumping into a hair transplant is going to be very imperative. Now, one last thing that I will say about Turkish hair transplant clinics is to try to avoid a clinic that specializes and offers a wide range of unrelated cosmetic services such as dental work, plastic surgery, liposuction, rhinoplasty. Not all the clinics that specialize in other procedures on top of hair transplants are inherently bad, but you also have to realize that clinics that specialize solely in hair transplants are going to be far more likely to stay focused on the latest techniques, provide dedicated expertise, and invest in staff training and technology specifically for hair restoration. On the other hand, a jack of all trades cosmetic clinic may be spreading its resources and attention too thin. And you guys kind of can think of it this way. Would you trust a cardiologist to perform orthopedic surgery just because they're doctors? Probably not, right? That's all for today, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on this clinic and just general views on what could have gone wrong and right. If you've had good or bad results at Dr. Siddick's hair transplant clinic, do share in the comments below. I would love to hear your stories that, people who've actually had actual personal experience, or maybe you can share your experience if you've had a hair transplant done in Turkey. But that wraps up this video, guys. Hope this video has been educational. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. Take care, guys.